The darkness of space around Kepler 442b had never felt so menacing. What started as another ordinary mining shift for the 50,000 inhabitants quickly turned into their worst nightmare. The Vorthak Empire's war fleet emerged from hyperspace, like a swarm of deadly insects, their massive dreadnoughts blotting out the stars with their sheer numbers. Commander Kixtal pressed his crystalline hands against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the enemy vessels arrange themselves in perfect attack formation. His translucent blue skin flickered with nervous energy patterns that betrayed his fear despite his years of military training. 300 ships, 300 instruments of death surrounding their small mining outpost, like wolves circling a wounded deer. The mining station groaned under the stress of emergency protocols. Red warning lights bathed the corridors in an ominous glow, while automated voices repeated evacuation procedures in 12 different languages. But there was nowhere to run. The station's handful of transport ships could barely carry 1,000 people, and the Vorthak would obliterate them before they cleared the docking bay. In the lower levels, families of different species huddled together in terror. The gaseous nebulites floated near the ceiling, their cloudy forms shifting between purple and grey with anxiety. Young Chitrak children clicked their mandibles nervously, while their insectoid parents tried to comfort them with gentle chittering sounds. The peaceful Quartzians, whose crystal-like bodies normally hummed with harmonious frequencies, now resonated with discordant notes of fear. The station's defense grid activated with pathetic results. Ancient plasma cannons that were designed to ward off asteroid impacts, and pirates now faced the most feared military force in this sector of the galaxy. Their energy readings barely registered on the Vorthak sensors. It was like pointing flashlights at a hurricane. Admiral Mordok's transmission crackled through every speaker on the station. His voice carried the cold authority of someone who had destroyed countless worlds without losing a moment's sleep. The translation systems worked overtime to convert his guttural Vorthak speech into something the diverse population could understand. Inhabitants of the illegal settlement designated Kepler 442b, his words dripped with menace. You have violated ancient territorial claims of the Vorthak Empire. Your presence here is an insult to our ancestors and a crime against galactic law. Commander Kixtal activated the emergency broadcast system, his voice trembling despite his efforts to sound calm. This is Commander Kixtal of Kepler Mining Station. We are a peaceful civilian operation with families and children aboard. We have no military capabilities and pose no threat to anyone. Mordok's laughter echoed through the speakers like breaking glass. Your weakness is not our concern. You have exactly 6 hours to prepare for either surrender or annihilation. Choose wisely. The communication channel cut off, leaving behind only the hum of life support systems and the quiet sobs of terrified families. Kixtal immediately began, sending distress signals in all directions, hoping against hope that anyone might be close enough to help. The responses that trickled back painted a grim picture. The Galactic Defense Coalition's nearest fleet was 3 weeks away at maximum hyperspace velocity. The Merchant Guild's security forces were dealing with pirate attacks in the Outer Rim. Even the notorious mercenary groups were either too far away or too smart to face the Vorthak Empire's finest. As the hours ticked by, the situation grew more desperate. The station's sensors showed the Vorthak ships moving into tighter formation, their weapons systems charging with deadly energy. Massive particle cannons that could vaporize entire city blocks swiveled to target the station's critical systems. Shield disruptors capable of turning protective barriers into deadly feedback loops hummed to life. Young Quartzian engineers worked frantically to boost the station's shields, but their efforts were like trying to stop a tidal wave with sandbags. The Nebulite technicians attempted to mask the station's energy signature, hoping to buy precious time. But the Vorthak scanners cut through their deception like sunlight through fog. In the station's main plaza, species that had never spoken to each other before found themselves sharing their fears and hopes. An elderly Chitrak storyteller entertained frightened children with tales of ancient heroes, while Nebulite healers used their natural abilities to calm panicked minds. The Quartzians sang haunting melodies that helped everyone feel less alone. In their final hours, Commander Kixtal stood in the command center, watching the countdown timer that marked their remaining time. 5 hours and 37 minutes until Admiral Mordoc's deadline. The distress beacon continued its desperate call into the void, but space remained empty, except for the predators already circling their home. The irony wasn't lost on him. Kepler 442b had been chosen for mining operations precisely because it was so remote and peaceful. No territorial disputes, no ancient claims, no political complications. Just a small rocky planet, with valuable minerals and enough space for different species to work together in harmony. Now that very isolation had become their death sentence. In a galaxy full of wonders and terrors, they were about to become just another forgotten casualty of Imperial expansion. The final hour had arrived. Admiral Mordoc's massive dreadnoughts moved into their killing positions around Kepler Station, their weapon systems glowing with deadly energy. The Vorthak commander sat in his command throne, savoring the moment before delivering the final blow to the defenseless mining station. His scaled fingers drummed against the armrest as he watched the countdown timer tick towards 0. "All ships, prepare for coordinated strike," he commanded through the fleet communication network. "Target their power core first. Let them watch their lights go out before we finish them." The 300 warships of the Vorthak Empire aligned themselves in perfect formation. Each vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering, bristling with enough firepower to level entire cities. Their hulls gleamed with advanced armor plating that could deflect most known weapons, while their shields shimmered with protective energy fields that had never been breached in battle. Commander. Kickstal stood helplessly in the station's command center, watching his people prepare for the end. The Quartzian children had stopped crying, their crystal bodies now dimmed to almost gray. The Nebulite elders floated in silent meditation, preparing their souls for the journey beyond. Even the normally chattering Chitrak had fallen silent. Their insect-like faces turned toward the approaching doom. Then something impossible happened. Space itself began to ripple near the edge of the system, like the surface of a calm pond disturbed by a falling stone. The distortion grew larger and more violent, crackling with energy that registered on every sensor array within 100 light-years. The fabric of reality seemed to tear apart, revealing a swirling vortex of blue and white energy that defied every known law of physics. "What in the void is that?" Admiral Mordock snarled, his confidence shaken for the first time in decades. His science officers scrambled to analyze the phenomenon, but their instruments showed readings that made no sense. The energy signatures were completely unknown, operating on principles that their most advanced computers couldn't identify. The portal expanded rapidly, its edges crackling with electricity that danced between dimensions. Strange harmonics filled the communication channels, a sound like singing metal and distant thunder. The Vorthak fleet's formation wavered as captains struggled to maintain their positions in the face of gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist. From the heart of the swirling vortex, a shadow began to emerge. At first it was just a dark shape moving through the chaotic energy, but as it broke through into normal space, the true scale of what was happening became clear. The UES, defiant, burst from the dimensional rift, like a leviathan rising from the depths of an ocean. The Terran battleship was massive, easily matching the size of the largest Vorthak dreadnoughts, but its design was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where alien ships favored smooth curves and flowing lines, this vessel was all angles and purpose. Its hull was dark gray metal marked with scars from countless battles, telling the story of a ship that had seen real combat and survived. The aliens watching from Kepler Station pressed against the observation windows in stunned silence. They had heard stories about humans, of course, the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel, building crude ships from primitive materials. The galactic community had largely dismissed them as an insignificant upstart civilization that would probably destroy itself within a few centuries. But this ship defied everything they thought they knew about human technology. Blue energy coursed along its hull in patterns that suggested power systems beyond their understanding. Strange weapon ports dotted its surface, their designs completely alien to established military doctrine. Most shocking of all, it had appeared through a controlled dimensional portal, technology that even the most advanced species considered purely theoretical. The dimensional rift collapsed behind the human ship with a sound like reality snapping back into place. The Defiant hung motionless in space for a moment, its presence somehow changing the entire battlefield. Where before there had been predators and prey, now there was uncertainty. Captain Lee Hyun's voice cut through every communication channel with crystal clarity. His tone was calm, almost conversational, but carried an authority that made even Admiral Mordok pause. "Vorthak Fleet, this is Captain Lee of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of galactic protection protocols. Stand down immediately, the Kao." Silence that followed was deafening. 300 of the galaxy's most feared warships faced a single human vessel, and somehow the balance of power had shifted in ways that no one could fully understand. Admiral Mordok's laughter finally broke the tension, but it sounded forced and hollow. "One primitive human ship against my armada. Your species barely achieved spaceflight a few decades ago. You build your ships from scrap metal and naive dreams." But even as he spoke, his tactical officers were feeding him sensor data that made no sense. The human ship's energy readings were off the charts. Its hull composition included materials they couldn't identify. Most disturbing of all, its weapon systems were completely unknown, making it impossible to predict what it was capable of. The creatures watching from Kepler Station held their breath, caught between hope and disbelief. Could this single human ship really stand against the most powerful fleet in the sector? Or were they about to witness the destruction of their potential saviors, leaving them more hopeless than before? The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the galaxy forever. Admiral Mordok's patience finally snapped. "Enough of this foolishness. All ships, open fire on the human vessel. Show them what happens when primitives challenge the Vorthak Empire." The response was immediate and overwhelming. 300 warships unleashed their fury simultaneously, filling the void with enough destructive energy to crack a moon in half. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and quantum torpedoes converged on the Defiant's position in a spectacular display of firepower that lit up the darkness like a newborn star. But when the energy dissipated, the human ship was gone. "Where did it go?" Mordok roared, his scaled face turning a deeper shade of purple with rage. His sensor operators frantically swept their instruments across empty space, finding nothing but residual energy signatures that made no sense. The answer came from behind his own flagship. The Defiant materialized directly behind the Vorthak command vessel, having somehow moved through space without traveling the distance between. The massive human battleship hung there for a moment, like a silent predator, close enough that the alien crew could see individual details on its battle-scarred hull. "Impossible," whispered the Vorthak science officer. "Nothing can move that fast without generating hyperspace signatures. Our sensors should have detected any form of propulsion." Captain Lee's voice came through the communication system again, still maddeningly calm. "Admiral, this is your final warning. Order your fleet to withdraw or we will be forced to take defensive action." Mordok spun his command chair around to face the human ship through the main viewport. This close, he could see strange blue energy flowing along the Defiant's hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The ship's design was even more alien up close, with angles and surfaces that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. "Fire everything," he screamed. "Point-blank range. Destroy that abomination." His flagship's massive guns swiveled to target the human ship, but the Defiant was already moving. It didn't accelerate away like a normal vessel would. Instead, it seemed to fold space around itself, disappearing and reappearing hundreds of kilometers away, in the blink of an eye. Lieutenant Commander Park So-min sat at her weapons console aboard the Defiant, her fingers dancing across holographic controls that responded to her thoughts as much as her touch. The human ship's weapon systems were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, combining advanced technology with principles that other species had never considered. "Target their weapon arrays first," Captain Lee ordered. "Disable, don't destroy. We're here to protect lives, not end them." Park nodded and began selecting targets with surgical precision. The Defiant's main guns emerged from hidden ports along its hull, revealing weapons that looked more like works of art than instruments of war. Instead of the bulky energy cannons favored by most species, these were sleek metal rails that hummed with electromagnetic force. The first salvo fired almost silently. No bright energy beams or explosive charges. Instead, small metal projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds, shot through space like invisible arrows. The Vorthak shields, designed to deflect plasma and energy weapons, offered no protection against solid matter moving at relativistic velocities. The projectiles punched through the enemy's shields as if they weren't there, striking weapon systems with pinpoint accuracy. Massive plasma cannons that had terrorized countless worlds simply vanished in showers of metal fragments. Shield generators exploded in brilliant flashes as the kinetic energy converted to heat and light. "They're using solid projectiles," one of the Vorthak captains reported in disbelief. "Primitive kinetic weapons. How are they penetrating our shields?" Chief Engineer Kim Min-ho monitored the battle from his position deep within the Defiant's engineering section. Around him, the ship's artificial intelligence systems processed combat data faster than any biological mind could comprehend. The KI learned from each exchange, analyzing enemy tactics and adapting human responses in real time. "Their shield harmonics are predictable," the AI reported in a voice that sounded almost human. "Rotating frequencies to compensate for expected energy weapon types. Kinetic barriers are minimal. Adjust projectile velocity and targeting algorithms accordingly," Kim responded, his hands moving across control surfaces that looked more like musical instruments than military hardware. "Let's show them what human engineering can do." The Defiant continued its impossible dance through the enemy formation. It would appear beside a group of enemy ships, disable their weapons with precise strikes, then vanish before their return. Fire could connect. The human ship moved like it was swimming through space itself, bending the rules of physics in ways that made the alien observers question everything they thought they knew about the universe. But the most shocking revelation came when the first Vorthak crew members began losing consciousness. The human ship wasn't just targeting weapons and engines. It was firing specialized projectiles that released neural disruption fields upon impact. The alien crews simply fell unconscious at their posts, their ships drifting helplessly but their lives completely intact. Commander Kickstall watched from Kepler Station in amazement. "They're not killing anyone," he whispered to his staff. "A single human ship is defeating the most feared fleet in the galaxy, and they're not killing a single enemy soldier." Within 20 minutes of the battle's start, over 50 Vorthak vessels drifted powerless through space, their crews sleeping peacefully while emergency life support systems kept them alive. The remaining ships found themselves unable to target an enemy that moved like liquid lightning and struck with the precision of a master surgeon. The aliens watching realized they weren't witnessing primitive warfare. They were seeing the next step in the evolution of combat itself. As the battle raged on, something far more terrifying than human weapons began to unfold. Tactical Officer Choi Ji-woo sat at her console aboard the Defiant, her fingers moving across interfaces that glowed with soft blue light. What she was doing should have been impossible. Every Vorthak ship in the enemy fleet was protected by military-grade encryption systems that had never been broken by any known civilization. Yet somehow, the human ship was slicing through their most secure databases like a hot knife through butter. "Access granted to Vorthak personnel files," Ji-woo reported calmly to Captain Lee. "Cross-referencing with social media, family records, and personal communications. Building psychological profiles now." The alien crews watching from their disabled ships felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. Their most private information was being laid bare by technology they couldn't understand. Personal messages to loved ones, family, photos, childhood memories, secret fears and dreams. Everything that made them who they were was now in human hands. Captain Lee's voice suddenly filled the communication channels again, but this time he wasn't speaking to Admiral Mordock. Instead, he addressed individual crew members by name, speaking in perfect Vorthak dialects that he shouldn't have been able to know. "Gunnery Officer Zaltek of the battleship Razor's Edge," Lee's voice was surprisingly gentle. "I know you joined the military to pay for your son's medical treatments, the surgery he needs for his birth defect. We have doctors on Earth who could help him without the risks your physicians are concerned about." Aboard the Razor's Edge, Zaltek nearly fell from his gun control seat. How could this human possibly know about his son's condition? That information was classified in his personal military file, accessible only to the highest levels of command. Yet here was an enemy captain speaking about his most private worries with the compassion of an old friend. The psychological warfare continued with devastating precision. Communications specialist Vixara, your mother's birthday is next week. She's been worried sick about you since your deployment began. She still keeps your childhood drawings on the kitchen wall of your family home, on Vorthak Station 7. Vixara's mandibles clicked nervously as tears formed in her compound eyes. The human wasn't just accessing their databases, he was reading their lives like open books, understanding their deepest connections and using that knowledge not to hurt them, but to remind them what they had to lose. Chief Engineer Kim Min-ho coordinated the information assault from his position deep within the Defiant. The ship's artificial intelligence systems were performing miracles of data processing, analyzing thousands of personal files simultaneously and creating detailed psychological profiles of every enemy crew member. But the real genius wasn't in the technology. It was in how the humans chose to use it. Target the soldier on Deck 7 of the Dreadnought Blood Moon, Captain Lee instructed. The young one who enlisted last month. The communication channel opened to a specific workstation. Private Kicksmal, I know this is your first deployment. Your parents were so proud when you graduated from military academy. Your father wore his old dress uniform to the ceremony, even though it was too small for him now. The young Vorthak soldier's scaled hands trembled as he recognized details that only his family should know. Around him, his veteran comrades listened, in growing unease as the human captain demonstrated an impossible level of knowledge about their personal lives. But the true horror of human warfare wasn't the invasion of their privacy. It was what the humans did with that information. Instead of using their fears against them, Captain Lee spoke to their hopes. Instead of threatening their families, he offered to help them. The psychological assault was delivered with such genuine compassion that it felt more like counseling than combat. Commander Jekta, your wife is pregnant with your first child, Lee continued, his voice carrying across multiple ship channels now. You've been reading her parenting books during your off-duty hours. You want to be a better father than your own was. That's admirable. Surrender now, and you'll be home in time for the birth. The named commander sat frozen in his command chair, staring at the tactical display showing his disabled ship. The human was right about everything. The pregnancy they'd only confirmed last week, the secret insecurity about fatherhood, even the parenting books hidden in his private quarters. How could they know such intimate details? Admiral Mordok watched his fleet's morale crumble in real time. His soldiers weren't just facing superior technology. They were confronting an enemy that knew them better than they knew themselves. The humans had somehow mapped not just their military capabilities, but their very souls. All ships maintain. Formation, he barked desperately. Don't listen to their psychological tricks. But it was too late. The Defiant's surgical strikes continued, disabling weapons systems while carefully preserving life support. Every shot was perfectly placed to render ships helpless without causing casualties. The human ship could have annihilated his entire fleet within the first hour of battle, but instead, it was systematically removing their ability to fight while keeping every single crew member alive. This restraint was more terrifying than any death ray or planet-killer weapon. It demonstrated a level of tactical superiority so complete that the humans could afford to be merciful. They weren't fighting for survival. They were teaching a lesson about the futility of resistance. Ship after ship, crew after crew, Mordok muttered, watching his tactical display fill with disabled vessels. They know everything about us, and they're choosing not to kill us. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't facing primitive newcomers to the galaxy. He was confronting apex predators who had evolved past the need for wholesale slaughter. The humans had become something far more dangerous than conquerors. They had become judges. Admiral Mordok stared at his tactical display in defeat as another dozen of his ships drifted powerless through space. Over two-thirds of his mighty fleet was now disabled, their crews sleeping peacefully while human neural disruptors kept them unconscious but unharmed. The psychological warfare had broken his remaining soldiers' will to fight more effectively than any weapon of mass destruction. All ships, he said quietly into his communication system, his voice heavy with the weight of absolute defeat. "Stand down. Repeat, all Vorthak vessels stand down immediately." The order rippled through what remained of his fleet. Ship after ship powered down their weapons and shields, admitting surrender to a single human vessel that had made the galaxy's most feared armada look like children playing with toys. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the hum of life support systems and the distant crackle of damaged equipment. But Admiral Mordok's humiliation was complete when he made his final decision. Rather than face the shame of defeat, he ordered his remaining functional ships to retreat immediately, abandoning the disabled vessels and their unconscious crews to whatever fate the humans had planned for them. "Admiral, what about our people?" his second-in-command asked in horror. "We can't just leave them." "They're already lost," Mordok snarled, his scales darkening with rage and shame. "Retreat to the outer system. We'll report this to High Command and let them decide what to do about these humans." The functional Vorthak ships engaged their hyperspace drives and vanished into the void, leaving behind nearly 200 disabled vessels floating helplessly in space. Their crews remained unconscious, dreaming peacefully while their abandonment by their own commander played out in the cold darkness. Captain Lee watched the retreat with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. "So much for military honor," he commented to his bridge crew. "They're willing to abandon their own people to save face." "What are your orders, sir?" Lieutenant Commander Park So-min asked, her weapon system still locked onto the remaining disabled ships. "The unconscious crews will wake up in a few hours. Medical bay teams prepare for large-scale rescue operations," Lee announced ship-wide. "We have nearly 50,000 enemy personnel who are about to wake up confused and possibly injured. I want them treated with the same care we'd give our own wounded." Dr. Yoon Ha-na was already preparing her medical teams for the massive undertaking. The Defiance Advanced Medical Bay could handle thousands of patients, but they would need to work efficiently to treat everyone who might need help. The neural disruptors were designed to be completely harmless, but some aliens might have adverse reactions that required immediate attention. "Medical shuttles launching now," she reported to the bridge. "We'll board each disabled ship and provide medical assistance to anyone who needs it." The translation systems are already programmed with basic medical terminology in Vorthak and their allied languages. Within hours, human medical teams were moving through the enemy ships like angels of mercy. They found confused and frightened alien soldiers waking up to discover their fleet had been defeated, and their commanders had abandoned them. Instead of the execution or torture they expected, they were greeted by human doctors, offering medical assistance and food. The aliens watched in amazement as their former enemies treated their injuries with gentle efficiency. Dr. Yoon moved from ship to ship, personally checking on the most seriously injured crew members and making sure everyone received proper care. Her medical teams worked around the clock, showing the same dedication to enemy wounded as they would to their own people. Meanwhile, aboard Kepler Station, the rescued civilians pressed against every available viewport to watch the incredible scene unfolding in space. Commander Kixtal could barely believe what he was seeing through his crystalline eyes. "They're actually helping them," he whispered to his staff. "The humans defeated the most powerful fleet in the sector, and now they're providing medical care to their enemies." The diverse alien population watched in wonder as human shuttles moved between the disabled Vorthak ships like tiny fireflies bringing light to the darkness. Children of different species pointed excitedly as they saw their saviors working to help the very soldiers who had come to destroy them. Captain Lee's final transmission went out on all channels, reaching not just the immediate area, but broadcasting across the entire galactic communication network. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that would reshape political discussions for generations to come. "This is Captain Lee Hyun of the Terran Defense Force," his voice carried clearly through space. "Today we prevented the destruction of innocent lives at Kepler Station, but our message extends far beyond this single battle. Humanity stands with those who cannot stand alone. We will protect the innocent, defend the helpless, and show mercy to those who surrender. This is our promise to the galaxy." The transmission ended, but its impact was just beginning. Within hours, news of the battle had spread through hyperspace, communication networks to every corner of civilized space. A single human ship had defeated a fleet that had conquered dozens of worlds and then treated their defeated enemies with unprecedented compassion. Alien governments that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers suddenly found themselves re-evaluating everything they thought they knew. Emergency council sessions were called on 100 different worlds, as political leaders tried to understand what this meant for the galactic balance of power. The revelation that Earth's crude ships were actually advanced beyond anything other. Species had sent shockwaves through military establishments everywhere. How long had humans been developing this technology in secret? What other capabilities were they hiding? Most importantly, what did they want? As the Defiant prepared to depart, space began to ripple again near the edge of the system. The same dimensional portal that had brought the human ship opened like a doorway between worlds, crackling with energy that defied understanding. Captain Lee stood on his bridge, looking out at the rescued station and the floating enemy ships. Filled with wounded soldiers his people had saved. "Take us home," he ordered quietly. "Our work here is done." The massive human battleship moved toward the swirling portal, its hull still scarred from battle, but somehow more magnificent than ever. As it disappeared back into the dimensional rift, the portal collapsed behind it, with a sound like reality healing itself. The galaxy had changed forever in a single day. Humanity had announced its arrival not with conquest or demands, but with protection and mercy. Their greatest weapon wasn't their incredible technology or their impossible ships. It was their refusal to become the monsters that war usually created. The age of human protection had begun, and the universe would never be the same. The end.